All right, let's dive right into this explainer and pop the hood on the absolute massive financial engine that's powering today's modern economy. I'm talking about venture capital. We hear about it all the time, right? Unicorns, mega rounds, those explosive IPOs making headlines. But how exactly does this machinery actually work? And, maybe more importantly, is it actually funding the innovations we need most right now? Today, we're going to look past that shiny exterior and really inspect the internal gears of the venture capital model. Just to wrap your head around the sheer horsepower of this engine, consider this number. 7 of the top 8 public firms by market cap worldwide? Yeah, they were backed by venture capital prior to their public offerings. We're talking about absolute titans here. Alphabet, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft. So this isn't just some niche corner of finance. This is literally the fundamental fuel for the highest growth companies on the planet. But hey, before we start inspecting the rusted gears of this machine, we need to get on the same page about what institutional venture capital actually is. Essentially, it's a highly specialized form of financing. It's where funds are raised from massive entities, think university endowments or public pension funds, to invest in and actively oversee high-risk, high-potential startups. It's not just, writing a check and walking away. Historically, it's about providing intensive scrutiny, staged financing, and really hands-on governance to mold these risky new ideas. Let's kick things off with part 1, the engine of innovation. Now, before we start critiquing the system, we really do need to acknowledge its successes. The roadmap for our explainer today relies heavily on a fascinating working paper out of Harvard Business School, put together by Josh Lerner and Raman Ananda. Through their incredibly detailed research, we can see exactly how this financial model shapes global innovation, literally tracking its history from post-World War II investments all the way to the massive global funds we see today. And the sheer leverage venture capital has on the broader economy is honestly staggering. Consider this contrast for a second. Less than 0.5% of new startups in the US ever receive venture capital. 0.5%. Yet those exact same companies make up 47% of initial public offerings. And the craziest part, they account for a massive 89% of all recorded research and development spending. So this tiny, tiny fraction of companies is disproportionately driving our entire technological frontier forward. Moving right along to part 2, the software obsession. Okay, as we look a little closer, we're going to see our first structural stumble in the machine. It's this massive shift away from tough tech, things like clean energy and advanced materials, and toward a very specific type of product. Take a classic VC firm like Charles River Ventures. Back in the 1970s, their first fund backed highly physical technologies. We're talking high-strength fabrics, early electric cars, and, get this, turnkey systems for pig farming. I know, right? But fast forward to 2019, and well, the pigs are gone. Almost 90% of their investments are now totally concentrated in information technology, software, and social networks. The scope of what gets funded has narrowed dramatically. So, why this obsession with software? Well, it boils down to simple economics. Venture capitalists generally operate on fixed timeframes, usually these 10-year funds. Because of that, they need uncertainty to be resolved and resolved fast. Software businesses are built on proven technologies with super quick market feedback, which yields an annualized gross return of around 24%. Meanwhile, something like clean tech, that requires massive upfront capital and seriously long timelines just to prove it even works, and it drags along at a mere 2% return. Under the current model, it's just so much harder and way less profitable to fund complex physical technologies. Which brings us to part 3, the gatekeeper problem. So who exactly holds the purse strings here? Well, it turns out venture capital is incredibly concentrated right at the very top. Out of nearly 1,000 institutional venture investors active between 2014 and 2018, just the top 50 investors, that's roughly 5% of the firms, controlled half of the roughly $284 billion raised. This massive concentration means a very, very small number of deep-pocketed gatekeepers are essentially shaping the entire direction of global innovation. And when you look at who actually sits on the boards at these top firms, the true decision makers, the picture becomes even more narrow. A staggering 91% are male. The research highlighted in our source material makes a really crucial point here. This lack of gender diversity actually impacts what types of businesses get funded. It means the ideas that actually receive capital are naturally being filtered through a very specific, highly homogeneous lens. And it doesn't stop there. These gatekeepers are incredibly homogeneous geographically and educationally too. Think about this. 75% attended a tiny handful of elite universities. Nearly 30% graduated from just 2 business schools, Harvard or Stanford. And to top it off, nearly 70% of them are based in the San Francisco Bay Area alone. It really begs the question, doesn't it? What kind of blind spots are we creating when the people funding the future all live in the exact same bubble? All right, let's look at part 4, the governance crisis. The third and frankly final structural flaw we're analyzing today is this sudden and pretty dangerous relaxation of corporate oversight. Historically, venture capital wasn't just about handing out money, it was about strict oversight. Back in the 1980s, VC was a tough business. You got your money in stages, it was tied to very strict performance goals, and you had heavy board oversight. But move into the 2010s, and intense competition among VCs led to this era of highly competitive, founder-friendly deals. Investors were literally giving up control just to get a piece of the hot startups. Then, in 2017, the market gets totally flooded by mega funds, most notably SoftBank's massive $100 billion Vision Fund. With that sheer volume of capital sloshing around, traditional, careful governance just fell completely by the wayside. And honestly, we've all seen the high-profile consequences of this lack of oversight. When inexperienced founders are just handed billions of dollars without proper checks, balances, or an experienced board guiding them, things can go disastrously wrong. Just look at the spectacular implosions and the subsequent oustings of charismatic founders at companies like Uber, WeWork, and Theranos. It's a glaring spotlight on what happens when the venture capital engine runs way too hot without the brakes of proper corporate governance. So, where do we go from here? Part 5, fixing the funding machine. How do we actually fix this? How do we upgrade this engine to make sure we're funding the radical technological changes our society actually needs, and do it responsibly? Well, the authors of that Harvard Business School paper lay out a pretty clear blueprint for tomorrow. It requires us to do 3 main things. First, rethink standard fee structures to align incentives. Second, bring incubation for tough tech, those hard, complex scientific innovations, in-house, inside the venture funds themselves to reduce that early risk. And third, leverage philanthropic money to tackle those massively important early-stage risks that traditional VC just completely avoids right now. Now that first point on Vs, that is absolutely crucial. See, the standard model gives VC firms a fixed 2% management fee. When you're managing massive funds that run into the billions, that 2% becomes a massive profit center all on its own. Actually, think about it. They get paid that even if the startups they fund completely fail. This creates a huge incentive for VCs to just raise massive funds and play it safe to protect their franchise. By returning to an old-school negotiated budget model where limited partners only cover actual operating expenses, we can fix those misaligned incentives. It forces investors to stop relying on guaranteed fees and pushes them to take the necessary risks on truly groundbreaking, world-changing scientific innovations. Because under that model, they actually have to perform to make their returns. Which brings us to a pretty crucial question for you to consider as we wrap up. The venture capital machine is incredibly powerful, for sure, but right now it's optimized for a really narrow slice of innovation. If venture capital only funds software that can be proven quickly, who is going to step up? Who is going to fund those 20-year innovations in clean energy, advanced materials, and healthcare that we literally desperately need to save the planet? Upgrading this financial engine isn't just about getting better returns for a few investors. It's about shaping the actual future we are all going to live in. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this gives you a completely new perspective the next time you hear about a massive startup funding round.